Everything is just fine here. No need to call anyone.
Over the past few installments, Far Cry has carved out a unique identity for itself. Let's forget about Primal for a second. The series has tried and mostly succeeded to push an evocative narrative by introducing us to some of the most psychopathic villains in games, all the while sending players out in a massive open world to explore, giving them the freedom of choice to play the game the way that they want to. In these regards, Far Cry 5 isn't going to be a huge surprise, as it does continue to iterate on this formula. Once again, players are thrust into a beautiful, broad open world. Once again, players will be fighting against a strong central villain. This time around, that villain happens to lead an end-of-the-world cult. Far Cry 5 is somewhat more grounded than the third or fourth installments in the series. The narrative, while somewhat player-driven, is very much focused on a rookie police officer who goes with a US Marshal to arrest Joseph Seed. The leader of the Eden's Gate cult, Seed, and his siblings are controlling Hope, Montana through force, through drugs, and through the indoctrination of the locals. Like any good Far Cry villain, Joseph Seed is eccentric and maniacal. He preaches from the Book of Revelations that the end of the world is coming, and that the arrival of your character is the opening of the first of 7 seals that will bring about the end of times. After the arrest attempt is botched, you meet with a local resistance that puts you on the path to taking down the Seed clan. Broken into 3 distinct regions, Far Cry 5 is once again another massive game to explore, though there have been some key differences made to the way that the game is played. Each region is headed by one of the Seeds. Jacob, a soldier, controls the northern Whitetail region. Faith, a siren who deals in a deadly concoction known as Bliss, controls the east, while John controls the west. Taking down each of these region leaders is the only way to reach Joseph and to free Hope from the cult's clutches. After completing the opening sequences that sets these events in motion and doing some tutorial type content, players can basically go anywhere and do anything in Far Cry 5. They can choose to tackle any region they wish and do it in any order they want, whether that be trying to complete all the objectives in one region or bouncing back and forth. While there are some differences to the gameplay, the objectives that must be completed are largely the same. Aside from some slight differences in terrain, they'll differ mostly by the people you encounter and the stories that they tell. There's a number of things to do though. You can tackle cult outpost challenges, which are similar to previous Far Cry games. You can rescue residents of Hope that are being held hostage by the cult. And there are cult transports that are constantly driving around that can be destroyed or looted. There are cult VIPs that can be hunted down and killed, and there are the aforementioned story missions and side missions that can be completed in each region as well. For the most part, it all funnels back into a resistance meter. The more activities that you complete, the more resistance points that you'll earn, and once you've maxed out the resistance points for each region, you'll be able to enter into a final confrontation with the boss. The resistance meter is tiered though, and as you progress through it by completing objectives, the regions become more and more chaotic as the cult leader tries to strike back at your efforts. You're free to tackle challenges within a region in any way you see fit, and there are plenty of rewards for exploring and doing all of the quests you can get your hands on. You can recruit specialist team members to your cause. These include 6 human characters that have unique abilities and traits, and 3 animal companions that each have unique abilities as well. While there is a lot of carryover between game ideas from the previous games and Far Cry 5, with things like hunting for animals, outpost liberation, and gunplay and combat feeling largely familiar, the way that the story and map expands through exploration, and not just climbing towers, is somewhat of a breath of fresh air.
I know what you're thinking, and no, I ain't gonna have you climbing towers all over the county for me, so don't worry. Also, try not to fall from up there.
There is plenty of character and variety to the cast that you'll meet in Hope, Montana. If there's an archetype that you can think of, you'll probably meet them if you explore long enough. That said, Ubisoft seems to be going for shock value in Far Cry 5. From scenes of suicide to missions that require you to beat animals with a baseball bat, there's some stuff in this game that is only suitable for adults. Ubisoft has made some great strides on making the single player side of Far Cry 5 better. The world that's been built here is outstanding, and most of that character comes from the residents of Hope. They've also pushed some of the other aspects of the series further here as well. The entire game is playable via online co-op. Instead of the side mission only structure of Far Cry 4, 2-player online co-op allows a second player to join the game, much like you would call on an AI specialist to help you. It's also worth noting that progression in co-op is only for the host player, so missions that are accomplished by a group are only saved for the host. While multiplayer in Far Cry 4 was ambitious and quite fun when you could find a full game of players to play with, Ubisoft has really bolstered their online offering in Far Cry 5. Through a system called the Far Cry Arcade, players can play not only standard multiplayer type games or tackle solo or cooperative missions, but they can once again create maps and game variants of their own. This Far Cry Arcade is incredibly robust. It features map building tools that are quite complex, and they feature many assets from different Ubisoft games. You could compare it to something like a Little Big Planet for first-person shooters. In the pre-launch environment, there was already a ton of variety here in terms of the multiplayer maps and the content that could be played by yourself in solo hero missions or cooperative missions. While it's certainly not the first time that Far Cry has flirted with map editor options, it's definitely the most robust. The editing tools are somewhat complex, and this aspect of Far Cry Arcade is only for those that are willing to put in the time to learn the tools that are available to make something that is truly worth playing. Tinkering around with these building tools, there are so many different options to play with that you could spend many hours in making the most simplistic of maps. The downfall here is that I'm still not 100% sold on Far Cry multiplayer as something that has the gameplay chops to keep players coming back for more. For those that do like it though, there's plenty to keep you busy. Far Cry 5 is simply bursting at the seams with content. You could easily sink 30 to 40 hours in the campaign and still not have seen everything before the credits roll. While it's not an exotic destination, the likes of which we saw in the last two numbered games, Hope, Montana has its own sense of beauty. From fog rolling through the tree-lined hills to waves rippling on the crystal blue lakes or dark nights where you can see every star in the sky, Far Cry 5 can be visually stunning at times. Cutscenes are equally impressive on the presentation front. The only thing that truly throws off this presentation aspect is in some of the animations and erratic behavior of NPC and enemy character models. This aspect of the game still isn't quite nailed down in my opinion. From enemies just running around like chickens with their heads cut off to NPC characters not moving or getting stuck on terrain, there's definitely some jank to the game in this regard. We didn't experience anything game-breaking, but I wouldn't be surprised if others did. With Far Cry 5, Ubisoft has done exactly what should be done in sequels. They took what works from the previous games and built upon it, and got rid of the stuff that didn't fit. Instead of just throwing a ton of missions and content at the player, in Far Cry 5 you never really feel overwhelmed. You're naturally uncovering new missions, characters, and items. Alongside this, they've topped their previous efforts in terms of world building and storytelling, all the while retaining that distinct feel of a Far Cry game. While Far Cry 4 felt like more of the same with very few new ideas pushed to the forefront, Far Cry 5 feels a little more ambitious in the freedom it gives players. In both the single player mode and online modes, it's clear Ubisoft wants you to play what you want, the way you want. We did not get it with the last two games in the series, but Far Cry 5 feels like the generational leap that fans have been waiting for. Innovations in gameplay and a provocative story will keep you engaged for the entirety of this lengthy campaign. The ability to do and see it all with a friend makes it even better, and for those that really dig in, there's a ton of online content to consume or create. Far Cry 5 is definitely the biggest, and probably the best, Far Cry game to date.